Good day and welcome back to British Report. Imagine, if you will, a Britain where the traditional rite of passage, buying your first home, picking out the paint for the spare room, and arguing over where the sofa goes, has been replaced by a much grimmer reality. Imagine a generation of young Britons, educated, ambitious, and ready to contribute, who are instead finding that their starter home is actually just their childhood bedroom, now featuring a slightly more depressing coat of existential dread beige, while the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, stands at the dispatch box talking about fixing the foundations, the literal foundations of our society. Our housing stock are being snatched away from the very people who were promised a stake in this country. We are witnessing a monumental shift in priorities that has left the youth of this nation not just disillusioned, but absolutely incandescent with rage. From the boarded-up streets of Middlesbrough to the once thriving seaside towns of Wales, the message from Number 10 is loud and clear. If you are a young Briton working hard to save for a deposit, you are at the back of the queue. But if you have just arrived on our shores, the government is ready to roll out the red carpet, or at least the refurbished lino of a state-funded flat. It is a policy of last in, first served, and it is driving a youth exodus that could leave this country culturally and economically bankrupt. Quick favour, if you are loving this fast-paced, sharp-edged look into the chaos currently tearing through Westminster, hit that subscribe button and click the notifications bell icon. Over 92% of viewers haven't yet. It is free, takes a second, and means the world to us. Thanks. If you did, now back to the show, because the anger bubbling over on our streets is about much more than just bricks and mortar. It is about the total betrayal of the British dream. Let us dive headfirst into the cold, hard reality of what it means to be young in Starmer's Britain. For decades, the social contract was simple. Work hard, get an education, and you will earn your place in society. But today, that contract has been shredded and tossed into the shredder of socialist idealism. Going to university now costs a small fortune, leaving graduates with an almighty debt that hangs around their necks like a millstone before they even cash their first paycheck. And what is waiting for them at the end of that expensive rainbow? A job market that is increasingly volatile, with unemployment rising, and a government that seems more interested in taxing businesses into oblivion than fostering growth. It is no wonder that those in the know are predicting a youth exodus. Recent research by the Adam Smith Institute suggests that a staggering quarter of young Britons are now seriously considering emigration. We are losing our brightest and best to countries that actually value their contribution, leaving us with a brain drain that will haunt this economy for decades. But while the debt and the job market are significant, I believe that housing is the ultimate catalyst for this national disillusionment. There is a profound sense of shame in the fact that many young people are now stuck living with their parents well into their 30s. They are unable to establish a stable foundation, unable to start families, and unable to build a life of their own. Contrast this with the experience of previous generations. By the age of 24, many couples had already secured their first home. Their lives were built around it. New friends, weekend DIY projects, and the rewarding character-building struggle of working hard to pay for it all. Owning a home isn't just about having a roof over your head, it is about having a stake in society. It gives you a sense of responsibility and a reason to care about your local community. When you own your home, you aren't just a tenant of the state, you are a shareholder in the nation. And that is exactly what Sir Keir Starmer's government is currently dismantling. The transition from community building to community clearing is happening right under our noses, and the hypocrisy is staggering. Labour is obsessed with the idea that we need to concrete over the countryside to solve the housing crisis, threatening our green belts and our rural heritage. But you only need to take a stroll through the centre of a town like Middlesbrough to see the utter absurdity of that plan. Our town centres are filled with boarded-up houses, empty, decaying structures that drag down the entire neighbourhood and act as a magnet for crime and neglect. These aren't just buildings, they are wasted opportunities. Yet instead of being offered to young local families who are desperate for a first step on the property ladder, these homes are being snatched up by private contractors. Why? To house asylum seekers on behalf of the state. It is a perverse incentive system where the government pays private companies to fill our rotting urban cores with migrants, while the local youth are told to keep saving their pennies in their parents' attic. This brings us to the Welsh seaside scandal that has sent shockwaves through local communities. Just the other day, it was announced that refurbished residential flats in a Welsh coastal town, the kind of properties that would be perfect for a young couple starting out, will instead be used to house asylum seekers. Imagine being a local nurse or a teacher, working overtime, living in a cramped rental, and watching as a block of flats down the street is polished up and handed over to people who have just arrived. How wrong can our priorities be? These homes should be the front line of an urban renewal project, offered to young people who would bring fresh young life into communities that have been ravaged by an unrelenting churn of transients. A young family moving into a refurbished flat doesn't just occupy a space, they shop in the local stores, they send their children to the local schools, and they invest their time in the neighborhood. An asylum seeker housed by a private contractor is a temporary resident in a system that views them as a commodity. One builds a community, the other manages a crisis. What is truly infuriating is that we don't need a radical new ideology to fix this, we just need to look at what worked a decade ago. Around 10 years ago, a handful of councils launched schemes offering properties for just 1 point. The catch: the new owners had to invest their own sweat equity to bring the buildings up to standard and commit to living there for a set period. It was a brilliant way to turn urban decay into social gold. It empowered people who had the drive but not the capital. We could easily revive this, adding safeguards to ensure that these proud new owners don't just flip the houses for quick cash, but instead become the bedrock of a revived town centre. It is a plan that rewards hard work, encourages responsibility, and solves the housing crisis without touching a single blade of grass on the green belt. But while we dither, other countries are wising up and eating our lunch. Italy and Spain have launched their own €1 villa schemes, enticing frustrated young families from the UK to abandon the grey skies and high taxes of Starmer's Britain for a sun-filled adventure in the Mediterranean. When a young British professional looks at the choice between a £400,000 broom cupboard in a London suburb or a spacious villa in Sicily for the price of a cup of coffee, can we really blame them for leaving? We are literally exporting our future taxpayers because our government would rather house migrants in Welsh flats than give our own children a reason to stay. It is a spectacular failure of statecraft that is being felt from the tip of Cornwall to the Highlands of Scotland. The transition from hotels to cheap housing is the latest desperate move from a Labour government that has completely lost control of its borders and its budget. As they scramble to move migrants out of expensive hotels to save face, they are moving them into the very housing stock that should be the engine room of social mobility for young Britons. It is a game of musical chairs where the music is being played by the Treasury, and the British youth are the ones left standing when it stops. A country that cannot offer its young people a way to put down roots is a country that will not keep them. They will vote with their feet, taking their hopes, their dreams, and their potential tax revenue elsewhere, and Britain will be immeasurably poorer for it. The authoritarian socialist mindset that we have discussed before is at play here too. The state believes it knows best where to allocate resources, and in Starmer's world, the immediate need to clear the migrant hotel backlog trumps the long-term need for a stable, home-owning youth. It is short-termism elevated to a national policy. By prioritising the state-appointed resident over the self-starting citizen, Labour is eroding the very concept of the stake in society that Margaret Thatcher once championed. When you take away the hope of ownership, you take away the incentive to participate in the democratic process. Why care about the local council or the national economy if you are perpetually a guest in your own country? The angry supporters who are taking to the streets are not just far-right agitators, as the mainstream media would love you to believe. They are parents who are worried their children will never leave home. They are young workers who are tired of seeing their taxes used to refurbish flats they can't afford to rent. They are the people of Middlesbrough who are tired of seeing their town centre used as a holding pen for a failed immigration policy. They are the silent majority who have finally found their voice, and that voice is screaming, "Enough is enough." Sir Keir Starmer might think he can ignore the noise from behind the reinforced glass of his armoured convoy, but the anger is real, it is growing, and it is justified. Let us look at the analogy of the overcrowded lifeboat. If a boat is taking on water, the captain's first priority should be to ensure the safety and security of those already on board. You don't start handing out the best seats and the extra rations to people you have just pulled from the water while your own crew is drowning in debt and despair. It isn't cruel to prioritize your own citizens, it is the fundamental duty of a government. Starmer is acting like a captain who is so worried about the optics of the rescue that he is willing to let the ship sink. The youth exodus is the sound of the crew jumping overboard, and once they are gone, they aren't coming back. The government needs to cotton on, and they need to do it quickly. They need to get their priorities straight and realize that a house is more than just a unit of accommodation, it is a building block of a civilization. If we want a stronger, fairer Britain, we need to start by giving our young people a reason to believe in the future here. We need to stop the private contractor land grab in our northern towns and start a Young Britain's Homestead Act. We need to turn those boarded-up windows into symbols of hope, not signs of surrender. And we need to do it before the last bright young thing boards a flight to a one villa in Spain, leaving Sir Keir Starmer alone in his forensic bunker, wondering where it all went wrong. In summary, The housing crisis in Britain has reached a breaking point where social cohesion is at stake. The choice to house asylum seekers in refurbished residential flats while young locals are priced out of the market is a slap in the face to every working person Labour claims to represent. It is a policy of national self-harm that is fueling a generation's desire to leave. From Middlesbrough to the Welsh coast, the cry for priorities not platitudes is getting louder. Sir Keir Starmer might have the baubles to ignore the public for now, but he won't be able to ignore the empty streets and the broken economy that a youth exodus will inevitably leave behind. Thank you so much for watching.